The man passed away again, but one of the guys, James Edwards, he had 2 daughters, and they were called, well, their nicknames were called Flo and Sweet. So these were really, you know, we had a dinner last night, and one of the guys described them as the Paris Hiltons, wasn't it? They were like the Paris Hiltons of Ireland, you know. So, you know, getting the distillery at this time was a bit of a burden for them. You know, they were much more into their social life, and they didn't really want to be involved too much. But, you know, they were involved for about, I would say, about 2 decades. You know, much more on the business side of things, but they really kind of let the management and the board themselves kind of run, and they were kind of in the background. So they kind of said, you know, in the 1940s they had had enough and they wanted to sell the distillery. So, you know, the board themselves, they all agreed, you know, okay, fine, if you want to get rid of it, let's do it. So they had a lot of offers. You know, they had an offer from within the distillery, which of course would have been a great choice, you know, keep that passion and the heritage within the distillery. They had offers within Dublin, they had offers in the US, they had offers all over Europe. So unfortunately, the ladies decided that they wanted a lot of money. You know, they wanted as much money as they could get for the distillery. So they said no to the offer from the guys within the distillery, and they decided to go with a distillery that came from a Swiss syndicate. So within the syndicate, you had the offer. It was £305,000. So a lot of money back then. I mean, I think it would equate to around maybe 2 million today. So it was a lot of money for back then. And you know, that's when I suppose the Locke scandal started, really. You know, the women, they said yes to this offer. At the time, you had this Control of Manufacturers Act in Ireland, and essentially what this meant was that, you know, in relation to distilleries, if you wanted to sell it, you couldn't sell it completely. You had to maintain 51% ownership, and then the rest would go to the buyer. So the reason why the Irish government did this was because a lot of Scotch and English people were coming over to buy the Irish distilleries that were in kind of, you know, like bad condition, and they could get them for a good price. So, you know, the Irish government, you know, they were trying to protect those distilleries and all the brands that were built. So with the way the guys kind of overcame this, the Swiss syndicate guys, they contacted a senator in the Irish government, Senator Quirk, a bit of a dodgy man, and he was kind of involved in auctions and stuff like that, and he put the bid in on their behalf, and he was kind of making a lot of commission. And this really sparked the whole scandal. The party that he was involved with in the government was called Fianna Fáil. They're really known for their scandals over the years, you know, tax evasion and lots of bad things. But he was right up there, and you had other guys on the opposition. So, you know, government parties are all trying to take each other down. But you had one of the other guys, Fine Gael, is our other party, and his name was Mr. Flanagan. He kind of threw the red flag in, and he was just like, you know, I'm hearing terrible things about the Locke Distillery. You know, I'm hearing that there's been these lovely Swiss gold watches are being passed on to the guys. You know, they were talking about the tea shops being involved as well in the whole scandal. So the government, you know, they called a tribunal, went on for 2 weeks, lots of back and forth. But really, what came out of it with the Swiss syndicate, all they wanted to do was to buy the distillery and sell off the stock for as much money as they could get on the black market, and then just sell the distillery again. So they really didn't have any good, you know, anything good that they wanted to do with the distillery. They were just there to make money. You know, there was a lot of I mean, one of the Swiss guys, I believe he wasn't even Swiss, he was Russian on a fake passport. And then the English guy involved, he was a bit of a crook himself, so it was a bit of a scandal, and it didn't really reflect very well on the ladies, you know, Sweden. You know, they essentially, you know, they made a really bad decision. They were just kind of looking at the money in that sense, and it really had a negative effect on the distillery itself, you know. Obviously the senators guys, they get away with it, so that was kind of squashed in terms, you know, the government had nothing to do with it. But the effect it had on the distillery, the girls were trying to look for new partners, but essentially nobody wanted anything to do with the distillery. It just had a bad reputation in Ireland, you know, so that was it really. And yeah, so the distillery, it closed, unfortunately. They had a lot of stock, they couldn't sell it, nobody wanted anything to do with it, and the distillery closed then in the 1950s. And it reopened in 87, but we'll kind of get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, let's go ahead.